The idea that changes everything. This is not just another audiobook. This is not just another collection of ideas. This is something far more dangerous, because once you truly understand what you are about to hear, your old way of thinking will no longer work. There is a moment in every person's life, a quiet, invisible moment, where everything could change. Not because of luck, not because of connections, but because of a single idea. Napoleon Hill spent over 25 years studying the most successful people in the world. Not 10, not 50, more than 500 of the wealthiest and most powerful individuals of his time. And what he discovered was not what most people expect. It wasn't intelligence. It wasn't education. It wasn't even hard work. Because if hard work alone made people rich, then every laborer would be a millionaire. Instead, he discovered something much deeper. Something hidden in plain sight. A pattern. A way of thinking. A way of acting. A way of seeing the world. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let me ask you something. What do you really want? Not what sounds good, not what people expect from you, not what feels safe, but what do you actually want? Money? Freedom? Power? Peace? Control over your life? Because here is the truth most people never admit. You don't get what you wish for. You get what you are programmed for. And most people are programmed for survival, not success. They wake up, they react, they complain, they repeat. Day after day, year after year. And then they wonder why nothing changes. But there are a few people, very few, who break this pattern. And they all start the same way, with a decision. A decision so strong, so clear, so absolute that it burns. Not a weak desire, not a casual wish, a burning obsession. The kind that keeps you awake at night, the kind that doesn't let you settle, the kind that refuses to accept average. There was a man who once had this kind of desire. He had no money, no connections, no special skills. But he had one thing, a decision. He decided that he would work with one of the greatest inventors in history, Thomas Edison. Not for him, with him. Now think about that. A poor, unknown man with no resources decides he will become a business partner to one of the most powerful minds in the world. Most people would laugh. Most people would say, be realistic. Be practical. Lower your expectations. But he didn't, because he understood something most people never do. Reality is shaped by those who refuse to accept it. He didn't wait for the perfect moment. He didn't wait until he was ready. He didn't wait for permission. He moved. With nothing, no money even for a train ticket. So he took a freight train, risked everything, and showed up. Imagine that moment, standing in front of greatness, looking like nothing, having nothing, but carrying something invisible, certainty. And when Edison looked at him, he didn't see a poor man. He saw something else, something rare, a man who had already decided. And that changes everything. Because when a person truly decides, their behavior changes. Their energy changes. Their focus sharpens. They stop negotiating with life. They start commanding it. Now here is where most people fail. They think success comes from opportunity, but that's not true. Success comes from recognizing opportunity when it's disguised. Because opportunity rarely looks attractive. It often looks like hard work, like rejection, like uncertainty. And most people miss it because they are waiting for something easier. But this man didn't miss it. He started at the bottom, doing small, meaningless tasks. Nothing glamorous, nothing impressive. Months passed. Nothing happened. No promotion, no breakthrough, no reward. And this is where almost everyone quits, because they mistake silence for failure. But something was happening inside. His desire was growing stronger, not weaker, because real desire doesn't fade, it intensifies. And then, one day, opportunity appeared. Not as a gift, but as a problem. A new invention that nobody believed in. Nobody wanted to sell it. Nobody saw its value. Except him. He saw what others couldn't, and he took action. That single moment changed everything. He sold it, not just a little, but massively. And that was the turning point. From unknown to partner, from nothing to wealth. And here is the lesson. It wasn't luck, it was alignment. His desire, his persistence, his awareness, all aligned at the right moment. And that is the formula. Not complicated, but not easy, because it requires something most people avoid: total commitment. Now let's go deeper. Why do most people never reach this level? Why do they quit, doubt, hesitate? Because they are controlled by something invisible: fear. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of uncertainty. And fear creates hesitation, and hesitation destroys momentum. And without momentum, nothing grows. But the few who succeed, they act anyway. Not because they are fearless, but because their desire is stronger than their fear. And that is the beginning of everything. Because the moment your desire becomes stronger than your fear, your life starts to change. Not slowly, but decisively. And this is just the first step, because what you are about to discover next is how desire turns into power. Real power. The kind that reshapes your reality.
There is a difference between wishing and deciding. Most people wish, very few decide. And that difference alone is the line between an ordinary life and a powerful one. Because a wish is weak, it negotiates, it hesitates, it fades. But a decision does something else entirely. It locks your mind in one direction. It eliminates alternatives. It creates pressure. And that pressure creates movement. Now, understand this clearly. Everything you see around you, every building, every business, every fortune started as a thought. But not every thought becomes reality. Only the thoughts backed by desire strong enough to survive doubt, delay, and failure. Napoleon Hill called this the starting point of all achievement: desire. Not a soft desire, not something you think about occasionally, but something that dominates your mind, something that becomes part of your identity. Because when desire reaches that level, it changes how you think. It changes what you notice. It changes how you act. And most importantly, it changes what you tolerate. You stop tolerating excuses. You stop tolerating distractions. You stop tolerating a life that doesn't match what you want. Now, let's make this real. Imagine two people. Both say they want success. The first one says, "I want to be rich," but continues scrolling, wasting time, avoiding discomfort. The second one says, "I will become wealthy," and starts eliminating everything that doesn't serve that goal. Same words, different intensity. And intensity is everything, because the world doesn't respond to what you say, it responds to what you demonstrate. Desire must be visible in your actions, not your words. Now, here is something most people misunderstand. They think desire is just motivation. It's not. Motivation fades, desire evolves. Motivation depends on how you feel. Desire defines who you are. When desire is real, you don't need to be pushed. You move automatically, because your brain starts working differently. It begins searching, filtering, connecting ideas. You start seeing opportunities others ignore. And this is where things start to get interesting. Because once your mind locks onto a goal, it begins to reorganize your reality. You meet the right people, you notice the right patterns, you take the right risks. From the outside, it looks like luck, but it's not. It's alignment. Now, let's talk about something critical. Why do most people fail even when they want something badly? Because their desire is not specific. They want more money, but how much? They want success, but what does that mean? They want freedom, but what does freedom look like? Vague desires produce vague results. Powerful desire must be defined, clear, precise, measurable. You must know exactly what you want and, more importantly, why you want it. Because the why is what sustains you when things get hard, and they will get hard. There is no path to wealth, to success, to control that does not involve struggle. But struggle is not the enemy. Confusion is. When you don't know what you want, every difficulty feels pointless. But when your goal is clear, every obstacle becomes part of the process. Now, listen carefully. There is a formula here, a structure, something you can actually use. First, decide exactly what you want, not generally, not emotionally, precisely. Second, decide what you are willing to give in return, because nothing comes for free. Not time, not comfort, not energy. Everything has a price, and those who refuse to pay it never get the reward. Third, set a deadline, because without time pressure, nothing moves. Fourth, create a plan. Even if it's imperfect, even if it's incomplete, start anyway. And finally, repeat your goal to yourself daily, morning and night, not casually, but with emotion, with belief. Because repetition programs the mind, and once your subconscious accepts something as real, it starts working toward it automatically. Now, this is where people get uncomfortable, because this level of clarity, this level of commitment removes all excuses. You can no longer blame circumstances. You can no longer wait for the perfect moment. You either act or you don't, and that's it. Now, let me tell you something most people will never admit. They don't really want success. They want comfort. They want certainty. They want to feel safe. And success requires the opposite: uncertainty, risk, discomfort. That's why most people stay where they are, not because they can't change, but because they won't. But you are here, listening to this, which means something is different. Something in you is searching, and that matters, because awareness is the beginning of transformation. Now, let's go deeper. There is a hidden force behind desire, something even more powerful: belief. Because desire without belief creates frustration. You want something, but you don't think you can have it. So you hesitate, you delay, you sabotage yourself. But when desire and belief combine, something else happens. You start acting as if it's already possible, and that changes your behavior, which changes your results. And that is where transformation begins. In the next part, we go deeper into this, because belief is not something you are born with, it's something you build. And once you understand how to build it, you unlock a level of confidence most people never experience. And when that happens, your limits start disappearing.
There is something more powerful than skill:
more powerful than intelligence, more powerful than experience. And most people completely ignore it. Belief. Not hope, not wishing, not pretending. Real belief. The kind that changes how you move, how you speak, how you decide. Because whether you realize it or not, you are always acting on what you believe. If you believe something is possible, you take action. If you believe it's not, you hesitate. And hesitation kills more dreams than failure ever could. Napoleon Hill called this force faith, but not in the way most people think, not something passive, not something you wait for. Faith is something you create, something you build deliberately. Because here's the truth, your mind does not care what is true, it cares what is repeated. Whatever you feed it consistently, it accepts. Whatever you repeat with emotion, it believes. And whatever it believes, it tries to make real. This is why two people can face the same situation and get completely different results. One sees opportunity, the other sees risk. One moves forward, the other freezes, not because of reality, but because of belief. Now think about your own life. How many times did you doubt yourself even before you tried? How many times did you hold back because you weren't sure? That uncertainty, that hesitation, that is not logic. That is programming. And most people never question it. They accept their doubts as if they are facts, but they are not. They are just repeated thoughts that became beliefs, and beliefs can be changed. Now here is where things get powerful, because once you understand this, you gain control. You realize you don't need to wait to believe. You can build belief intentionally. And there is a method, a system, something you can actually use. It starts with repetition, not random, not occasional, consistent. You must tell yourself what you want again and again, not casually, but with intensity, with emotion, because emotion is what signals importance to your brain. Without emotion, words are ignored. With emotion, they become commands. This is what most people get wrong. They say what they want, but they don't feel it. They repeat goals, but they don't believe them, so nothing changes. But when repetition and emotion combine, something shifts. Your subconscious begins to accept it. And once that happens, your behavior changes automatically. You start making different decisions. You take action without forcing yourself. You become aligned. Now let's go deeper. There is something else happening here, something even more important. Your brain is constantly filtering reality. Out of millions of inputs, it chooses what to focus on. And that choice is based on your beliefs. If you believe opportunities exist, you will see them. If you believe everything is difficult, you will find proof. The world doesn't change, your perception does. And perception shapes your life. This is why belief is so dangerous, because it works, whether it's positive or negative. If you believe you are not good enough, you will act in ways that confirm it. If you believe success is hard, you will create struggle. If you believe money is difficult, you will push it away, not consciously, but automatically. Now imagine reversing this. Imagine building a belief so strong that it overrides doubt, so strong that it drives action, so strong that it persists even when results are slow. That is faith, not blind, not irrational, constructed. And once you have it, you become unstoppable, because now you don't rely on external validation. You don't need approval. You don't need reassurance. You move, because you already decided. Now let's talk about something critical. Why do most people never reach this level? Because they wait. They wait to feel confident. They wait to feel ready. They wait to feel certain. But confidence is not the beginning. It is the result. It comes after repetition, after action, after persistence, not before. So if you are waiting, you are delaying your own growth, and that is a trap. The only way forward is to act before you feel ready, to believe before you see proof, because proof comes after movement, not before. Now, understand this clearly. Faith is not magic. It is a tool, a mental structure, and like any tool, it becomes stronger with use. Every time you reinforce it, it grows. Every time you doubt it, it weakens. So the question is simple. What are you reinforcing? Your limits or your potential? Because whatever you repeat will define your future. Now here is the turning point, the moment where everything starts to connect. Desire gives you direction, faith gives you power, but something else is needed, something that controls both, your subconscious mind. Because that is where everything is stored, your fears, your habits, your beliefs. And unless you learn how to influence it, you will keep repeating the same patterns without even realizing it. But once you understand how it works, you gain control over something most people never access, and that changes everything. In the next part, we go deeper into this, because this is where transformation becomes real, where thoughts turn into automatic behavior, and behavior turns into results. There is a voice inside your head, constant, relentless, always speaking. Most people never notice it, but it controls everything. Your decisions, your confidence, your limits. And the problem is, that voice is not always telling you the truth. It's repeating what it learned from your past, from your environment, from your experiences. And over time, those repetitions become beliefs, and those beliefs become your reality. Napoleon Hill called this process autosuggestion, the method of influencing your subconscious mind. Because whether you realize it or not, you are already using it every single day. When you say, "I can't do this, nothing works for me, I'm not ready," that is autosuggestion, and your mind listens. It accepts, it records, it reinforces. Not because it's true, but because it's repeated. Now, imagine reversing this. Imagine using the same mechanism, but intentionally, to build strength, confidence, clarity. This is where control begins. Because your subconscious mind does not argue, it does not judge. It simply accepts what is repeated with enough emotion, and then it acts on it, silently, automatically. Now here's the key. Words alone are not enough. You can repeat something 1,000 times, but if there is no emotion, no belief, no intensity, nothing changes. Because emotion is the signal. It tells your brain, this matters, this is important, this must be stored. So if you want to reprogram your mind, you must feel what you are saying. Not fake it, not force it, but connect to it. Now let's make this practical. You need a statement, clear, specific, powerful. Something that defines what you want, not what you fear, not what you doubt, what you want. And you repeat it every day. Morning, before the world distracts you. Night, before your mind goes into rest. Because those are the moments when your subconscious is most open. But repetition alone is not enough. You must visualize. You must see it, feel it, experience it as if it's already happening. Because your brain does not fully distinguish between real and imagined. What you imagine with intensity begins to feel real, and what feels real becomes believable, and what is believable becomes possible. Now understand this. This is not about pretending. It's about conditioning. You are training your mind to accept a new reality, and once it accepts it, your behavior follows, without force, without resistance. Now here is where most people fail. They try this for a few days, maybe a week, then they stop,
because nothing changed immediately. But that's not how this works. Your current beliefs were built over years, through repetition, through emotion, through experience. You cannot overwrite them overnight, but you can replace them with consistency, with patience, with intensity. And once the shift happens, it's permanent, because now your default thinking changes. You no longer doubt automatically. You no longer hesitate instinctively. You respond differently, and that changes your outcomes. Now, let's go deeper. There is another layer to this: your environment. The people you listen to, the content you consume, the conversations you have, all of it is programming you constantly. If you are surrounded by negativity, doubt, limitation, you absorb it, even if you don't realize it. And over time, it becomes your internal voice. So if you want to take control, you must protect your input. Choose what you listen to. Choose what you watch. Choose who you spend time with, because all of it shapes your mind, and your mind shapes your life. Now think about this. If you repeat something long enough with enough emotion, it becomes automatic. You don't have to think about it. It becomes part of you. And that is the goal: to make powerful thinking automatic, to make confidence automatic, to make action automatic. Because when that happens, you stop relying on motivation. You stop forcing yourself. You become consistent. And consistency is what creates results. Now, here is the transition. You have desire. You have belief. You have the ability to reprogram your mind. But something is still missing, because thinking alone is not enough. You need something that connects thought to action, something that transforms ideas into real-world results. And that is knowledge. But not just any knowledge, the right knowledge. Because information alone does not create success. Applied knowledge does, and most people never learn the difference. In the next part, we go deeper into this, because this is where strategy begins, where thinking becomes structured, and where results become predictable.
Most people believe knowledge is power, but that's not true. Knowledge alone is useless. You can read hundreds of books, watch endless content, learn countless theories, and still stay exactly where you are. Because knowledge without direction creates confusion, and confusion leads to inaction. Napoleon Hill made something very clear. It's not about how much you know. It's about what you do with what you know. There are people with degrees, certificates, years of education, still struggling financially. And there are others with little formal education, building wealth, creating influence, controlling their time. So what's the difference? Specialized knowledge, focused, practical, applied. Not general information, not random facts, but knowledge that solves a specific problem, creates a specific result, and generates value. Because money does not reward effort, it rewards value. And value comes from solving problems. The bigger the problem, the bigger the reward. Now think about this. If you can solve a problem that saves someone time, or makes someone money, or removes pain, you become valuable. And when you become valuable, you become difficult to replace. And when you are difficult to replace, you get paid more. This is the real game, not working harder, but becoming more useful. Now here is where most people fail. They collect knowledge, but never apply it. They learn, but never execute. They prepare, but never move. Because learning feels productive, but it's safe. Action is different.
Action exposes you. It reveals your weaknesses, your gaps, your fears. And most people avoid that, so they stay in learning mode forever. But success does not come from knowing. It comes from doing. Now, let's go deeper. There's another layer to this. You don't need to know everything. You need to know the right things, and you need access to what you don't know. This is where strategy changes, because instead of trying to become an expert in everything, you focus on your strength, and you surround yourself with people who fill your gaps. This is how powerful individuals operate. They don't waste time mastering everything. They build systems, they build networks, they leverage other people's knowledge. Now imagine this. You have a clear goal. You know exactly what you want. Instead of randomly learning, you focus only on what moves you closer. Everything else becomes irrelevant. This creates speed, clarity, momentum. Because now every action has purpose, every skill has direction. Now let's talk about something critical. Information is everywhere, free, unlimited, accessible. But access is not the problem. Selection is. Most people consume everything without filtering, without intention, and that creates overload. But successful people do something different. They filter aggressively. They ignore what doesn't matter, and they double down on what does. Because focus is a multiplier. The more focused you are, the faster you grow. Now here is something most people ignore. Knowledge evolves. What works today may not work tomorrow. So you must stay adaptable. You must stay curious. You must keep learning, but with direction, not randomly, not passively, strategically. Now, let's make this practical. If your goal is wealth, ask yourself, what skills create income? Sales, communication, problem solving, decision making. These are leverage skills. They amplify everything else. And once you develop them, your value increases across any field. Now, combine this with what you already have, your experiences, your interests, your strengths, and you create something unique, something that only you can offer. And that is where real opportunity begins, because uniqueness is power. Now, understand this clearly. You don't need to be the best in the world. You need to be valuable in a specific area, to a specific group, solving a specific problem. That's it. Now here is the transition. You have knowledge, you have direction, but something is still missing. Because knowledge alone does not create results. You need something that transforms knowledge into ideas, ideas into plans, plans into action. And that is imagination. The ability to see what does not yet exist, to connect what others don't, to create new paths. Because every fortune, every innovation, every breakthrough started as an idea. And in the next part, we go deep into this, because imagination is where real power begins, where you stop following and start creating.
Everything you see around you was once invisible. Every business, every invention, every breakthrough started as an idea. Not something physical, not something proven, just a thought. Napoleon Hill described imagination as the workshop of the mind, the place where desire takes form, where knowledge becomes something useful, where thoughts turn into plans. Because without imagination, nothing new is created. You can only repeat what already exists, and that is where most people stay. They follow, they copy, they react, but they never create, and that limits everything. Now understand this. There are two types of imagination. The first is synthetic. This is when you take existing ideas and rearrange them, improve them, combine them, adapt them. This is how most businesses are built, not by inventing something completely new, but by making something better, faster, simpler, more effective. The second type is creative imagination. This is different.
This is where ideas appear without obvious logic, suddenly, unexpectedly, like a flash, a moment of clarity. And most people ignore these moments because they don't trust them. They overthink, they doubt, they delay, and the idea disappears. But those who succeed, they capture it, they act on it, even when it doesn't fully make sense, because they understand something important. Ideas are fragile. If you don't use them, you lose them. Now let's go deeper. Why is imagination so powerful? Because it allows you to see beyond your current reality, to create a vision, and that vision guides your actions. Without it, you drift, you react to circumstances, you follow what's available. But with it, you move with intention, you create direction. Now think about your own life. If you don't define where you're going, something else will. Your environment, other people, random opportunities, and you end up living a life that was never truly yours. But imagination changes that. It allows you to design your future before it happens. Now, here's the key. Imagination is not just thinking, it is structured thinking, directed thinking. You don't just let your mind wander, you guide it. You ask questions. What do I want to build? How can this be improved? What problem can I solve? What opportunity am I missing? And your brain starts responding, connecting ideas, finding patterns, creating solutions. Because your mind is a tool, and like any tool, it works better with direction. Now, let's talk about something critical. Most people underestimate their imagination because they think creativity is something you're born with, but that's not true. Imagination is developed. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. The more you challenge it, the sharper it gets. But if you ignore it, it weakens. Now, here's where things connect. You have desire, you have belief, you have knowledge. Imagination brings them together. It transforms them into something real, something usable, something actionable. And that leads to the next step, planning. Because an idea without a plan remains a dream, a thought, a possibility, but never a result. And this is where many people fail. They have ideas, but no structure. They feel inspired, but take no organized action, and nothing changes. But those who succeed, they take imagination and turn it into a system, a strategy, a plan. And once that happens, everything becomes measurable, trackable, achievable. Now, imagine this. You have a clear idea, a strong vision. Instead of keeping it in your head, you break it down, step by step. You define actions, you assign time, you create structure. Now, your idea is no longer abstract, it becomes real. And once something becomes real, it can be executed. Now, here's something most people miss. Your first plan will not be perfect. It will fail. It will need adjustment, and that is normal. Because success is not about perfect planning. It is about continuous adaptation. You act, you observe, you adjust, again and again, until it works. Now, understand this clearly. The difference between those who succeed and those who don't is not intelligence, it is execution. The ability to take an idea and move on it, even when it's incomplete, even when it's uncertain, even when it's uncomfortable. And that is where real progress begins. Now, we move to the next level. Because imagination creates ideas, but organized planning turns those ideas into reality. And this is where strategy becomes power, where decisions become structured, where action becomes consistent. In the next part, we go deep into this, because without a plan, even the strongest desire will fade.
Ideas are easy. Everyone has them. Every day. Everywhere. But very few people turn them into reality, because ideas alone change nothing. Execution does. Napoleon Hill made this clear.
Desire becomes reality only when it is backed by a plan. Not a vague intention, not a hopeful direction, a structured plan. Because without structure, energy gets wasted, effort becomes scattered, and results never fully form. Now understand this. Planning is not about perfection, it's about direction. Most people wait until everything is clear, until every step is known, until every risk is removed. But that moment never comes, because clarity comes from action, not before it. So if you wait, you delay everything. But if you move, even with an imperfect plan, you start learning, you start adjusting, you start progressing. And that is what matters. Now let's go deeper. A real plan has elements. It is specific. It is flexible. It is actionable. You don't just say, I want to succeed. You define how, step by step. What will you do first? What comes next? What resources you need? What skills you must build? And most importantly, when? Because time creates urgency, and urgency creates momentum. Now here is something critical. You cannot do everything alone, and you shouldn't. This is where power multiplies. When you connect with others, when you build alliances, when you surround yourself with people who think differently, who challenge you, who strengthen your weaknesses. This is what successful individuals do. They don't isolate, they collaborate. Because one mind has limits, but multiple minds create expansion. Mastermind principle. This is not just networking. This is alignment. Shared goals, shared energy, shared focus. And when that happens, ideas become stronger, plans become sharper, execution becomes faster. Now think about this. How many times did you try something alone, struggled, got stuck, lost momentum? But imagine having people who push you, guide you, challenge your thinking. That changes everything. Now let's talk about failure, because this is where most people break. Their first plan fails, and they stop. They assume the idea was wrong, but the truth is the plan was wrong, not the goal. And this is a critical distinction, because success rarely comes from the first attempt. It comes from iteration, trying, adjusting, trying again, until it works. Every failure contains information, feedback, direction, but only if you analyze it. If you ignore it, you repeat it. Now here's the mindset shift. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is part of it. Every successful person has failed, repeatedly, but they didn't stop. They adapted, they improved, they kept moving, and eventually they found the right approach. Now let's get practical. When you create a plan, start simple. Don't overcomplicate. Define your next step, not the entire journey, just the next move. Execute it, then reassess, then move again. This creates momentum, and momentum creates confidence. Now here's something most people overlook. Your environment affects your execution. If you are surrounded by distraction, you lose focus. If you are surrounded by negativity, you lose energy. So your plan must include your environment, where you work, what you consume, who you interact with, because all of it influences your output. Now let's connect everything. You have desire, you have belief, you have knowledge, you have imagination. Planning brings all of it together into something real, something structured, something actionable. But there is still something missing, because even with a plan, most people hesitate, they delay, they overthink, they wait, and that destroys momentum. So what's missing? Decision, the ability to act without endless hesitation,
to move without needing certainty, because success favors speed, not perfection. And in the next part, we go deep into this, because your ability to decide will determine everything: your direction, your growth, your results.
There is a moment, small, almost invisible, where everything changes. Not because of effort, not because of time, but because of a decision. Most people don't fail because they lack ability. They fail because they hesitate. They think too long. They doubt too much. They wait too often. And while they are waiting, life moves. Opportunities pass. Chances disappear. Momentum fades. Napoleon Hill observed something powerful. Successful people make decisions quickly and change them slowly. Unsuccessful people do the opposite. They hesitate to decide and then change direction constantly, and that creates chaos. Now think about this. Every time you delay a decision, you weaken your confidence, because your mind starts associating hesitation with safety and action with risk. So the more you hesitate, the harder it becomes to act. But the opposite is also true. The more you decide quickly, the stronger you become, because your mind starts trusting you. It learns, when I decide, I move, and that creates power. Now understand this clearly. A decision is not just a choice. It is a commitment. It is the moment you eliminate alternatives, the moment you stop negotiating, the moment you move forward without looking back. And most people avoid this because decision creates pressure, responsibility, risk, and they want comfort. They want certainty. They want guarantees. But those don't exist, not in growth, not in success, not in anything meaningful. Now let's go deeper. Why do people hesitate? Fear. Fear of making the wrong choice. Fear of failure. Fear of judgment. And this fear paralyzes action. But here's the truth. There is no perfect decision, only informed ones. And action reveals the rest. You learn, you adjust, you improve, but only if you move. Now imagine this. You have an idea. Instead of analyzing it endlessly, you decide. You take the first step immediately. That creates motion. And motion creates feedback. And feedback creates clarity. And clarity improves your next decision. This is how progress actually works. Not by thinking more, but by acting sooner. Now here's something critical. Indecision is a habit, just like action. The more you delay, the more natural it becomes. The more you act, the easier it gets. So you must train yourself to decide, even in small things, what to do next, what to focus on, what to ignore. Because small decisions build the habit, and that habit transfers to bigger ones. Now let's talk about influence. Most people are not controlled by reality. They're controlled by opinions. What others think, what others say, what others expect. And that weakens decision-making. Because instead of choosing what is right for them, they choose what is acceptable. And that leads to average results. But those who succeed, they filter opinions. They listen, but they don't obey. They think independently, because they understand something important. If you follow the crowd, you get the crowd's results. Now understand this. Every major success story includes moments of uncertainty, moments where the outcome was unclear, but the decision was made anyway. That is the difference, not certainty, courage. Now let's connect this. You have desire, you have belief, you have knowledge, you have imagination, you have a plan. Decision activates all of it.
It turns potential into movement. But something still stands in the way, something that destroys more dreams than failure ever could. Procrastination, the habit of delaying what matters. And this is what we face next. Because even with strong decisions, if you don't act consistently, nothing changes. So in the next part, we go deeper into persistence, the force that keeps you moving even when motivation disappears, even when results are slow, even when doubt returns. Because persistence is what separates temporary effort from lasting success.
Most people start strong, motivated, excited, full of energy, but very few continue. Because starting is easy. Continuing is where everything breaks. Napoleon Hill made this undeniable. Persistence is the sustained effort necessary to induce faith. In other words, you don't wait to feel confident. You build confidence by continuing, even when it's hard, even when it's unclear, even when nothing seems to be working. Now understand this. The world does not reward intention. It rewards consistency. And consistency requires persistence. Because there will be moments where nothing moves, no results, no feedback, no progress. And this is where most people quit. They interpret silence as failure, but silence is part of the process. Growth is not always visible. Sometimes it's happening internally, in your skills, in your mindset, in your awareness. And then, suddenly, it shows. Now let's go deeper. Why do people quit? Lack of immediate results? Doubt? Fatigue? Distraction? But underneath all of that, there is something else. Weak desire. Because when desire is strong, persistence becomes natural. You don't need discipline. You don't need reminders. You move, because stopping feels worse than continuing. Now imagine this. You are working towards something, day after day, and nothing happens. Most people will stop. But if you continue, you enter a different level, a level where competition disappears, because most people never reach it. They quit too early. Now here is something critical. Persistence is not just repeating effort. It is intelligent repetition. You don't keep doing the same thing blindly. You observe, you adjust, you improve. You keep moving, but you refine your approach. This is what creates progress. Now let's talk about resistance, because every time you try to improve your life, you will feel it. Internal resistance, doubt, laziness, fear, and external resistance, people questioning you, circumstances slowing you down, unexpected challenges. This is normal. In fact, it's necessary, because resistance builds strength. Just like pressure builds muscle, difficulty builds capacity. Now here is the shift. Instead of avoiding resistance, you use it as a signal. If something feels uncomfortable, it usually means growth. If something feels easy, it usually means stagnation. So you lean into discomfort, not recklessly, but intentionally. Now let's make this practical. You need a system, something that keeps you moving even when motivation fades, because motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes, but systems create consistency. You define your actions daily, clearly, and non-negotiable. No matter how you feel, you execute, and over time it becomes automatic. Now here is something powerful: momentum. Once you build it, everything becomes easier. Decisions feel lighter. Action feels natural. Progress accelerates. But momentum requires a starting point. And that starting point is persistence. Doing the work even when you don't feel like it. Now let's connect everything. Desire gives you direction. Faith gives you belief.
Autosuggestion programs your mind. Knowledge gives you tools. Imagination creates ideas. Planning creates structure. Decision creates movement. Persistence sustains it. And now we reach something deeper, something even more powerful. The influence of other minds. Because no one succeeds alone. No one builds something significant in isolation. There is a force created when minds align, when energy combines, when focus multiplies. And that force changes everything. In the next part, we go deeper into this, because this is where growth accelerates, where ideas expand, where power multiplies.
There is a level of power you cannot reach alone. No matter how smart you are, no matter how driven you are, there is a limit. And beyond that limit, you need others. Not just people around you, not just casual connections, but aligned minds, focused, driven, moving in the same direction. Napoleon Hill described this as the mastermind, a coordination of knowledge and effort between two or more people working toward a definite purpose. Now understand this. When two minds connect, something unusual happens. It's not just cooperation, it's amplification. Ideas become sharper, solutions appear faster, perspectives expand, because you are no longer limited to your own thinking. Now imagine this. You have a problem. Alone, you analyze it from one angle, maybe two. But inside a mastermind, you get multiple perspectives, different experiences, different insights, different strategies, and suddenly, what seemed complex becomes clear. Now let's go deeper. Why is this so powerful? Because every person carries something unique: knowledge, experience, patterns, connections. And when these combine, they create something greater, a new level of intelligence that no single person could reach alone. This is how major success is built, not in isolation, but in alignment. Now here is something critical. Not every group is a mastermind. Most groups are distractions, complaints, negativity, lack of direction. And that weakens you, because energy is contagious. If you surround yourself with doubt, you absorb doubt. If you surround yourself with ambition, you absorb ambition. So the quality of people around you directly affects your results. Now think about your current environment. Who do you listen to? Who influences your thinking? Who challenges you? Who pushes you? Or who holds you back? Because whether you realize it or not, you are being shaped every day by the people around you. Now here is the shift. You must become intentional. You must choose your circle, not randomly, not emotionally, strategically. You look for people who are growing, who are thinking, who are building, people who demand more, not just from themselves, but from you, because that pressure creates expansion. Now let's talk about something deeper: accountability. When you operate alone, it's easy to delay, easy to justify, easy to stop. But when others are involved, something changes. You feel responsible. You show up. You follow through, not just for yourself, but for the group. And that increases consistency. Now imagine combining this with everything you've learned so far. You have a clear goal. You have belief. You are taking action. And now you are supported, challenged, expanded by others. That creates acceleration. Now here is something powerful: opportunities. Most opportunities do not come from ideas alone. They come from people, connections, introductions, collaborations. And when you are in the right circle, opportunities multiply, because now you are not just relying on yourself, you are connected. Now understand this clearly.
Isolation slows growth. Connection accelerates it, but only if it's the right connection. Now let's go even deeper. There is something else happening. Energy. Every person carries energy, focus, emotion, drive. And when aligned people come together, that energy combines, it strengthens, it elevates, and it creates momentum. Now imagine being in that environment where ideas flow, where action is normal, where growth is expected. You don't need motivation. You absorb it, and that changes everything. Now let's connect this. You have built internal strength, desire, faith, discipline. Now you add external force, alignment, support, expansion. This is where growth becomes exponential. But there is still one more layer, something deeper, something internal, something that most people ignore, but it controls everything. Your subconscious patterns, the habits you don't notice, the reactions you don't question. Because even with the right people, if your internal patterns are weak, you will limit yourself. So in the next part, we go deeper into the subconscious mind and how it silently controls your life. Because once you understand it, you don't just act differently, you become different.
There is a part of your mind that never sleeps, never stops, never pauses. It is always working, quietly in the background, controlling more than you realize. Your reactions, your habits, your emotions, even your decisions. And most people live their entire lives without ever understanding it. Napoleon Hill described it as the subconscious mind, the bridge between your thoughts and your reality. Because everything you repeatedly think, everything you emotionally feel, everything you consistently imagine gets stored. And once it's stored, it becomes automatic. You don't choose it, it runs. Now understand this. Your subconscious mind does not judge, it does not question, it does not analyze, it accepts. Whatever you feed it, positive or negative, constructive or destructive, it doesn't matter. If you repeat it with enough emotion, it becomes truth. Now think about your life. How many of your actions are truly conscious and how many are automatic? The way you respond to pressure, the way you handle money, the way you see yourself. Most of it is programmed from past experiences, from environment, from repetition. And unless you change the program, you repeat the pattern again and again. Now here is where it becomes powerful. Because once you understand this, you realize you are not stuck, you are programmed. And what is programmed can be reprogrammed. Now connect this. Everything you learned before, desire, faith, auto-suggestion, all of it feeds the subconscious. You are planting ideas over and over until they take root. And once they do, your behavior changes without effort, without force. Now imagine this. Instead of doubting automatically, you believe automatically. Instead of hesitating instinctively, you act instinctively. Instead of fearing failure, you expect growth. That is the shift from conscious effort to subconscious control. Now, let's go deeper. Your subconscious communicates through emotion, not logic. It responds to feeling, intensity, repetition. This is why emotional experiences stay with you. They imprint deeply and shape your behavior. So if you want to change, you must involve emotion, not just thought. You must feel the version of yourself you are becoming. You must experience it before it becomes real. Now here is something critical. Your subconscious does not understand negatives clearly. If you focus on what you don't want, you reinforce it. If you say, I don't want to fail, your mind focuses on failure. If you say, I don't want to be broke, your mind focuses on lack. So you must direct it clearly toward what you want, not what you fear. Now, let's talk about habits, because habits are the physical expression of your subconscious. They are repeated actions that require no thinking, and they define your results. Small habits, repeated daily, create massive outcomes over time, not instantly, but inevitably. Now, imagine changing your habits, not by forcing yourself, but by reprogramming your mind so the behavior becomes natural. That is real control. Now, understand this clearly. Your current life is a reflection of your current programming, your income, your discipline, your confidence, all of it. So if you want different results, you need a different program. And that requires consistency, because your subconscious learns through repetition, over time, not once, not twice, but continuously. Now, here is the final shift. Most people try to change their life from the outside, new goals, new plans, new actions, but they ignore the inside, their beliefs, their patterns, their programming. And that's why nothing lasts, because real change starts internally and then reflects externally. Now, we reach the final step, the final piece, where everything connects, where all forces combine to create something powerful, something rare, something that defines the highest level of performance. In the next part, we bring everything together into one system, one structure, one unstoppable force.
Everything you've heard so far was not random. Every idea, every concept, every principle was building toward this moment. Because on their own, they are useful, but together they become something else entirely. A system, a structure, a force. Napoleon Hill didn't just share ideas, he revealed a pattern, a repeatable formula used by those who rise again and again. Now this is where everything connects. Desire is where it starts, the fire, the drive, the refusal to settle. Without it, nothing moves. Faith gives it strength, turns possibility into certainty, allows you to act before results appear. Autosuggestion programs your mind, aligns your subconscious with your conscious goals, so your thinking and your behavior work together, not against each other. Specialized knowledge gives you tools, precision, direction, practical ability, so you are not guessing, you are executing. Imagination transforms everything. It creates ideas, new paths, new solutions, new opportunities. Organized planning turns ideas into structure, step by step, actionable, measurable, real. Decision activates movement, cuts hesitation, eliminates doubt, creates momentum. Persistence sustains it, carries you through resistance, through delay, through difficulty, until results appear. The mastermind multiplies your power, expands your thinking, accelerates your growth. The subconscious mind controls everything, stores your beliefs, runs your patterns, shapes your reality. Now imagine all of this working together, not separately, but as one system, one flow, one direction. This is where transformation happens, not slowly, but completely. Now here's the truth. Most people will hear this and do nothing. They will feel inspired for a moment, then return to old habits, old thinking, old patterns. Because change requires commitment, not interest, and there is a difference. Interest feels good. It listens, it agrees, it waits. Commitment acts, moves, persists, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's uncertain, even when it's difficult. So the question is simple. Which one are you? Now let's make this real. Not theory, not motivation, but action. You take everything you've learned and you apply it.
You define your desire clearly. You build belief daily. You reprogram your mind consistently. You acquire the right knowledge. You use your imagination to create opportunities. You build a plan. You decide. You act. You persist. You surround yourself with the right people, and you align your subconscious with your goals. This is not complicated, but it is not easy, because it requires discipline, awareness, consistency. But once you commit, something shifts. You stop reacting. You start creating. You stop waiting. You start moving. You stop doubting. You start building. Now understand this clearly. There is no finish line, no final destination. This is a process, a continuous evolution. You grow, you adapt, you expand, again and again. And that is the real power. Now take a moment, not to feel motivated, but to decide. What will you do next? Not tomorrow, not someday, now. Because everything changes the moment you move. And if you truly apply this, if you truly commit, your life will not stay the same. It can't, because you won't.